machine!
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
All right. Greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live through the America Free Radio studios on Revolution Radio through freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio network in America. By the way, I want to make sure that you all know that for 2021, you can always go to freedomslips.com. The website's right there on the front of the live stream, which is going on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, DLive, on video, and you can contribute. There are several ways of doing it. I recommend becoming a Patreon. It is the best way to help the studio. We know that there are hundreds of thousands of you out there that listen. All it takes is a few of you to give $1 or $2 a month, and the studio can keep the lights on, and we can compete with the other streams going out there. And thanks for everybody coming into the chat room. Eric, welcome. Freedom, whatever this is, Freedom, I like it. It's a big arm there. Mark Hovsepian, peace to you as well. Byron Hardwick, what is that? Big D 1955. Now that was a good year. Yes, that was a year that Einstein passed away and I was born. Money, Bags, Mags, DLive. That's right. And by the way, last week we tested, or maybe it was Sunday, we tested DLive, giving away some lemons, and it worked. So if you listen on DLive tonight, hang out, and we're going to give away some lemons because I got some stored up there, and we'll pass those out today and make that good. For those of you that don't know, you've never gone to dlive.tv/Brooks Agnew before, you can follow me for free, and you can, if you want to, tie your bank account to dlive.tv, and you can participate in the cryptocurrency, the blockchain that they have in on this TV station. Now, it was originally built for gamers, so if you want to watch people play, Call of Duty or Candy Crush or whatever, it's on there. And they're really good gamers on there from all different nations. And sometimes you just do that. Sometimes you just want to watch somebody else play video games. But with the great purge that took place, where, many of my colleagues were searching for some place to go. And I was as well at the beginning of the year, or actually toward the middle of last year, looking for a place to expand and restream or clone my stream to go to other places. And I found DLive. And so I began building the DLive podcast area in the folder. And sometimes there are only one or maybe two podcasters in there when I started. Now there's a dozen or more. So when the Great Purge happened, a lot of my friends who were much more successful at YouTube than me lost all of their followers, lost all of their advertisers, lost their income, their livelihood. And they flipped over to DLive, got back on their feet, and now the podcast community at DLive is formidable. They've made a few mistakes, a few hiccups in there. We've had some bad players. We got rid of them, and everything's cool now. And so typically what happens, as is the custom, when you're listening on DLive.tv, the host can distribute lemons to his listeners. If you're there and you're listening live, he can just put a certain amount of lemons in there, 50 or 500 or 1,000, and it will randomly search through the listeners and distribute lemons, which is real money. If you have it tied to your checking account, eventually you can cash out and take it your way. Go buy the Mercedes. So be more awesome, and we appreciate you too for being there and for listening. And the sound quality's fine, and the video quality's fine. We stream it at 1920 by 1080, which is high resolution, and this little camera right here does a really good job. As you can see, you've got my busy brain here in the background, all the artwork and book titles, and it's busy. I realize it. It should be just a plain wall with just X Squared Radio in the middle. But you know what? My psyche is cluttered, so my bookcase is cluttered, and that's just the way it is. So you don't use it as a model for your own design of your own office, but it works for me. Blue Otter says, the otter's out of the hospital. Gave Dr. Wallach a nice order. 6 days of antibiotics. Very good, very good. Good to see everybody back on their feet. Because you're going to need your feet to get around this year. This year is going to be quite interesting. This is a 2-hour program, and the way the format works a little differently than other formats that I'm on. It's 1 hour straight. We take about a 3 or 4 minute break at the top of the hour, and then we do the other hour. So it's a different format, and I interact with the chat room a lot. So I'm watching Facebook, I'm watching Twitch, I'm watching DLive, I'm watching YouTube, all those chat rooms at the same time. So it doesn't matter where you are, you can chat. I can see it. If it's intelligent, we'll discuss it. Or if it's humorous, or if it's insulting. Well, not if it's insulting. But, yeah, it says I'm X-tagged, so it can't give me lemons, and I don't know why that is. But I have gone into the boards, which is on Discord, and I've asked why that is, and evidently some bad players got in there who were Antifa thugs, and they were planning this disruption in Washington, D.C., the day that me and 500,000 of my friends went there to celebrate our great country peacefully. And we didn't know the thugs were going. We didn't know what they were planning, but evidently they must have used DLive to do some of the planning. I don't know how to do that. I wasn't involved. But so a few spoiled it for the many. And so they made it to where the hosts now starve. So we can't get any lemons from you. And I hate it. But if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. I'll give away every last lemon I have. I have maybe 9,000 or whatever. I'll give away every last lemon I have, and I will still love you, and I will still broadcast. So DLive is not going to discourage me, not going to stop me, because I don't do this for a living anyway. It's a hobby. So if DLive goes back to being free and they want to kill their blockchain, have at it. Have at it. That's just the way it is. Yes. Mark, I agree with you. He says an uncluttered desk is the sign of a sick mind. I don't have a cluttered desk. My desk is very well organized. I have this really cool, golf bag. See here? I got all my pens and my scissor. Everything is there. Everything's pretty well organized. And we're not going to look at the letter file. That's off limits, but everything else is pretty well organized. The bookcase is more of an expression of my multiple personalities. No, it's not a disorder. It's orderly. We know who's in charge, don't we, guys? All right. What is it, freedom? The love of God in our heart and soul will never be taken away from humanity. No, but you could give it away, I suppose. You could give it away. We discuss this from time to time. People sometimes write on the social media, what can I do to find somebody to love me? And I write back and say, well, don't worry about it. The only thing you have to worry about in this life is how you love others. Even Jesus had enemies. You get out of this life and realize that you loved everybody as hard as you possibly could, and you had some even better loves than others, you've lived a good life. Don't worry about if people love you back or not, because that'll turn you into a politician, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Frankie found a way around the lemon problem. Well, put it in the chat room. I won't leak the secret, but we'll try it. And if you give me lemons, I'll give them back. That's for sure. Freedom says, I'm a retired oil man. Without oil or gas, America can't survive. That's a fact. If we have to buy from foreign countries, the price will skyrocket. You know, when I was a kid, I was a gearhead. Even before I could legally drive, I was borrowing my mother's car and driving anyway. I mean, who doesn't, right, in America? Our culture is enhanced, and in some way we have a symbiotic relationship with our cars. You know, a car is not just transportation. Our car is our office. Our car is our love shack. A car is an expression of you. When you go to high school, you know, I had a 70 Superbird that I shared with a friend of mine who owned it. I fixed it. That was a great car, even though it was a rattle trap and it was loud and it was long and it was fast and it was loud and it was just fun to drive, and it just turned heads. But you know, there were people that drove Beamers and Porsches, and at the time we were in the Mazda, I think RX-2 age, rotary engine that did all the backfiring. You probably don't remember those days, but some of us rode motorcycles and some of us rode 10 speeds. It was an expression of your femininity and your masculinity and your social status, I suppose. And it was that way in music. It was that way in movies. It was that way because I grew up in Southern California, right around Colorado Boulevard, and that's in Pasadena, and lots of songs written and movies written about cars. And I live maybe 3 miles from Charlotte Motor Speedway, which is next to the Z-Max Raceway, which is the world's only 4-wide drag strip. Oh, wow, that's something else. When you watch 4 AA fuelers going down there, it is so loud. It's so fast. 0 to 300 miles an hour in less than 4 seconds. It's really something to watch. I said when I was a kid, the internal combustion engine is here to stay. Too many things can run it. It can run on alcohol, methanol, vegetable oil, gasoline, propane, methane. There's all kinds of things that can run an internal combustion engine, and you can have fun. And it's not that expensive. I mean, the original infrastructure, the drilling and the pipes and the refineries and all that, yes, all that was expensive, but the volume of the fuel made up for it. And even though it was cheap to make gasoline and even cheaper to make diesel fuel, the real value in crude oil was in the chemicals, was in the durable goods, the monomers and the solvents and the pigments and dyes and all kinds of things that were made from petroleum, fibers and polymers. All that stuff was the big money in petroleum, and they used every last cracked molecule of it. Gasoline came off pretty early. Diesel fuel came off pretty early. Not a whole lot of processing to do to it, and so it was cheap. And the diesel that came from what we call the rack or petroleum replaced diesel that Rudolph Diesel originally created, which was vegetable oil. You could run an engine off of vegetable oil. You can run a diesel off of used transmission oil, off salad oil, off of used fryer oil, as long as it's filtered. I mean, it's just a fatty acid, and it's under such compression that it will explode. So the issue is like he's saying, I'm trying to get back to his post. Like Freedom is saying in YouTube, the issue is that when we got to that point, petroleum was pretty darn cheap. So if I said to, say, somebody in China, you have a rickshaw here, a pedicab, and I want you to take me and 3 of my friends, take me 5 miles for 25 cents. He would beat me upside the head with a cane. It's ridiculous. It's going to cost you way more than that. That's human power. But that's what you can do with gasoline. Now, it isn't all that efficient for the short trips because a truck or a SUV or a bus going a short trip doesn't make a lot of sense because it gets such terrible mileage. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 miles per gallon is just not economical. You're up in the 21, 25, 35 cents per mile range. But once you get out on the freeway and get that thing stretched out, 20, 22, 23 miles to the gallon, now you're talking about hauling 7, 8, 9,000 pounds down the road at 80 miles an hour. It's a pretty cheap fuel. It's pretty cheap. Of course, the issue has always been, now when I grew up in Southern California in the 70s and 60s, there was no such thing as a catalytic converter, no such thing as fuel injection. I mean, there was, but on rare cars, it was mostly carburetors, which got horrible mileage, and they were awful as far as pollution. And I remember when I was 14 years old, I was taking flying lessons out at Fox Airport out in the valley, San Fernando Valley. And we'd take off at roughly dawn, which is like 6:05 in the morning. We would take off and fly out and do some maneuvers and then fly back to the airport and land, which was either at Fox or at Burbank. Now, when you flew out, it was crystal clear. Dry, summer skies, no problem. But you go out, you do your maneuvers and everything for 1 hour, because it was like $35 an hour back then to rent the airplane. By the time you fly back, what had happened is the smog would come through the pass and begin filling up the San Fernando Valley. The smog was from all the cars on the freeway that went through the pass from and to and from San Fernando Valley. People worked in the valley, or they lived in the valley and worked in the city, or they lived out in Santa Monica or whatever and worked in the valley. The smog would block the view of the airport. Now, me, being 14 and a half years old, I hate to tell you, but I was on what's called visual flight rating. In other words, I fly roads. If I can't see the ground, I'm in trouble. I don't have instruments. I'm not rated on the instruments to be able to land. So my instructor would have to land IFR, instrument flight rating. He'd have to go down through the smog until he could see the runway and land that airplane. Now, this was in the 60s, right? 68, 69. Now, here we are, 2021. There are 3 times as many people living there now. Simi Valley's packed to the foothills with condos and houses. There's not a spare inch of ground left for any kind of apartment to be built. Lots and lots and lots and lots more cars on the road. But you can fly out of Fox or fly out of Burbank, and you can fly back in an hour, and you can still see the ground. You know why? Because the cars are so clean now. Our air is so clean. And California, I have to say, is one of the best areas in the world for clean air. They're very self-conscious about it. These old clunkers, these smokers, these old cars on carburetors, they're all gone. They're all gone. Everything's replaced with either electric or fuel injected, and it's got catalytic converters on it, oxygen sensors, fuel management systems that are very complex and very efficient. And so what has happened is cars that used to get 12 miles to the gallon now get 40 miles to the gallon. I'm serious. You could buy a Nissan Altima and get 40 miles to the gallon. There are some Hondas that get 50 miles to the gallon. Well, of course, what this does is it uses less fuel, so you can put more cars on the road for the same amount of fuel. And even through all those years, 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, we were not energy independent. We bought oil, even though Seal Beach was packed with oil wells. Yeah, Seal Beach is prime real estate now, baby. But in those days, it was all filled with deep oil jacks going up and down, and oil tanks everywhere, and you could smell oil. It smelled like money all up and down the coast. Now they would die if they saw an oil pump on Seal Beach. But the long story short is, we were never energy independent. We bought oil from the Middle East. And, of course, when Jimmy Giveaway Panama Canal Carter became president, all the oil assets in the Middle East became nationalized. Shell and Arco and all those guys, they lost control of all the equipment and all the wells and everything that they had built in the Middle East. The Middle East took them over. OPEC took them over. So we became dependent on them for fuel. Now, of course, and Moverling is exactly right, this was the creation of the petrodollar. We agreed to let them nationalize all their oil wells, provided they only sold petroleum in dollars. So the oil still got converted to dollars. The dollars kind of shaved a little profit off of that, and then it went right back out onto the market. It traded on the market in dollars. And that was our buy-in to all that. And it was that way. It was that way up until 2017. In 2017, President Donald Trump introduced a totally new concept. A concept really nobody had even thought was in the realm of reality. And that was, how about if we uncap all of our wells, access all the prime oil producing land that we have that the federal government owns. It was about, 640 million acres that the federal government owns. I don't know if that's even legal or not, but the federal government does own 640 million acres, which is about 28% of the landmass of America. And how about if we let companies responsibly drill on that? And so they did. And what happened in a very short amount of time is America became not only energy independent, but we became the number one energy producers in the world. Well, what do you think happened? Well, a little thing called a glut. You know what a glut is? A glut is you just finished breakfast and you cooked up a pound of bacon and a dozen eggs and half a loaf of bread for French toast and coffee. And everybody ate. And, like you eat a big breakfast like that, you're like, oh, I'm ready for a nap or whatever. But it's like right when you finish, just as you're washing up dishes, hey guys, what are we going to do for lunch? See, that's a glut. At that point, people that have just finished breakfast go, oh, man, I can't even think about food. I couldn't even shop for food right now, let alone plan a meal. Right now, I'm so full. That's what a glut is, and that's what happened to the oil market. Oil went from 65, 95 a barrel down to 20 to 30 a barrel because it was a glut. Nobody wanted to drill. Nobody wanted to produce. All the tanks were full. Everything. Every tank was full. Every super tanker was full. Every pipeline was full. Every gas station. And so what happened is the price went down. And I don't know if you listened to this program very long or not, but we do a lot of scientific analysis and mathematical analysis of supply and demand, market trends, and let's just call it world forces. One of those world forces, of course, you might guess, is the price of oil. Absolutely. we have 3 superpowers. The rest are super consumers, but 3 superpowers. One of them produces oil. Well, actually, 2 of them produce oil and 1 doesn't. So, one of those countries that produces oil, it makes up about 50% of their gross domestic product. Not so in America. America, oil we're very diversified. We have lots of products. We have soybeans, we have timber, we have coal, we have oil, we have all kinds of technology, refined goods like steel and rosins and all kinds of stuff. We have a balanced economy. No one thing is going to ruin our economy if it goes south. Not so in Russia. Russia is not the Soviet Union anymore. They're not diverse anymore. Oil is plentiful in Russia, and it makes up about 50% of their gross domestic product. So if the global price of oil goes down, it hurts Russia. Russia gets anxious. They look to expand because they need to have other sources of income because oil's not enough to support their economy. Now, they are diversifying, and they have over the last 10 or 15 years, but oil for a long, long time, up until maybe the mid-2000s, was a significant portion of Russian production. So Russia made deals with Europe. Europe buys natural gas and oil from Russia. There's a pipeline, goes right down into Europe, and Europe is heated with Russian gas. It's a good relationship, right? They still have NATO, but that's another story. The other country, the other superpower, doesn't really produce that much oil on their property, but they are a big consumer, and that is China. So if the price goes down, it helps China. But if it goes down too far, it hurts Russia. If it goes up, it helps Russia, but it hurts China. So for a long, long time, the strategy of the United States, partly because the oil industry was so interwoven with our government, not only in the Pentagon, but other agencies, we controlled the price of oil. When Jimmy Giveaway Panama Canal Carter started capping off all the wells in the early 70s, it wasn't too long until he created an energy shortage. Wow, how many times did I hear that growing up? I mean, we were buying gas for $29.9, $39.9 when I was a kid. I know I worked at a gas station. I drove a car that got 12 miles to the gallon. Perfectly happy with that. But all of a sudden, in the summer of 73, gas went to 66 cents a gallon. We thought we were going to die. I mean, it was crazy. You couldn't think about filling up the tank. That was insane. It was just too much money. It was a big change. It was over 100% change in the price of oil. So we all knew it was a manufactured shortage. Of course we did. The point is that when Trump became president, he changed the paradigm. We were no longer dependent on other countries for any oil or natural gas. And we were net coal exporters again. So we were producing more energy than we could use. This was a very powerful position to have. Very powerful. And so it was so surprising to see one of the first batches. By the way, hello Kelly in the chat room, and Chad is out there. Let's see. Does oil naturally lubricate the plates in Earth? Maybe that's contributing to increase in shallow quakes. I don't think so. I think the plates that you're talking about aren't inland; they're coastal. So the drilling that takes place offshore typically is what's called deep water drilling. So it takes place anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000, 12,000 feet deep. It's deep drilling. Go way down and then drill down through the sea floor. And these rigs are really something to see. In the Gulf of Mexico, they're not that hard to manage, but you get out in the North Sea where you have 300-foot swells in a stormy day. It can be quite hairy to operate those rigs. I mean, who got the idea to drill out there anyway? But they did, and it's been profitable for them. Tessa 1111 says, and the 8-cylinder engines bit the dust along with the space fins. That was 1957 had high fins. 56 they were a little bit smaller. 57 they got kind of crazy, and I think they hung around till about 62, and then the fins went away. Andre says, my 52 Studebaker got about a half mile per gallon, probably because it had an old flathead 8-cylinder in it. Yeah, that was a crazy engine. Not very efficient at all. So I don't think the V8 is dead. I have a V8 in my truck, and I get 22 miles to the gallon. But I could have got the V6 turbo, and I think for most of my driving, it would probably work just fine because I drive the freeway. I drive about 270 miles every day, every weekday. And I probably could do with the turbo then. But I also pull a 30-foot trailer with an electric truck on it. So by the time I put that 7,000 pounds behind the truck, I need the V8. The 6-cylinder just wouldn't cut it. It would be straining its guts out on a hill. And 8-cylinders, when they're not working very hard, that fuel injection leans way out, and they're actually quite efficient. Scott, you're a good man, has an 8-cylinder as well. An 8-cylinder will get 500,000 miles, 400,000 miles on it, which is kind of crazy because when I was a kid, odometers didn't even go to 100,000 miles. 99,999, they rolled over to zero. You know why? Because the car was in the junkyard by then. When people say, yeah, that's 67,000 original miles. Original miles means the odometer hadn't flipped over yet. Now they have 7-digit odometers, so you can have 375,000 miles, and it'll show on there 375,000 miles. And we have what's called the MV1, which is a legal document that will really fine you heavily if you mess with the odometer in a vehicle, because that's considered the direct. Oh, what is that, Preston? Wow. Check this out. My first car was a 1968 Plymouth Barracuda Fastback, metal flake blue. Will you get out of town? Do you know that I had a 1968 Barracuda? Did you have the V8 in it? Because mine had a 383. It was fast, and it had a 390 posi in it. When I bought it in 75. I bought it in 75. A guy had it for sale. I went to his house. The 4 tires were flat. It was in a barn. And what had happened is his son had bought this 68 Barracuda, metal flake blue with the dark stripe down the middle. You remember that? Fastback, disc brakes, bucket seats, automatic transmission, torque flight. And his son had gone to Vietnam and gotten killed. So that car had about 22,000 miles on it, sitting in the barn. He didn't know what he had. I bought it for $800. I winched it up on my trailer, hauled it to the tire store. I put new wheels and tires on it. I put new exhaust on it because the exhaust had rotted off of it. I ordered carpet, a factory carpet set, pulled the seats out, laid the new carpet, put those seats in it, buffed that car out, and it was beautiful. And it ran like a dream. And it was fast. It would do about a 1390 in the quarter mile, which is pretty darn quick for a street car. I love that car. It was great. So I kept it, and then later on when I was in college, this was about 1979, I ran out of money. I was a sophomore, and I ran out of money, and I needed money to go to school. And there was a guy named Dale Mayers. He had 14 national titles in drag racing. And he offered to buy that car off me so many times. I've called him up. And I said, you still want to buy this Barracuda? He said, yeah. I said, bring your trailer and your checkbook. So he came to the house. I sold the car for, I think I sold the car for $2,500. I had to go to school. That car today is worth $95,000. Easy $95,000. Never wrecked. All the numbers matched. It's at least worth $95,000. And Freedom, he just shamed me. My first car, says Freedom, was a 1969 Ford Mustang with an 8-track tape for music. Oh my gosh. So let me guess. And you had Krager rims too? Isn't that awesome? So here's the question, Freedom. Did you have Jackson Browne as a tape to stick in your 8-track? Huh? Or how about Joe Walsh? Huh? I'm thinking, because, 8-tracks had pretty good sound. It was a wide tape, and they had pretty good sound. I thought it sounded better than the cassettes, and they were so convenient because the head just moved up and down, for the tracks. So you could just switch around the album pretty easily. And the tape just looped. So you just stuck it in, baby, and drove. 69 Ford Mustang. Good night. And Moverling says, I drove a V12. I've got to read this now. I drove a V12 for 6 years. I got about one gallon per mile. Thank goodness I didn't have to buy the fuel. Wow, M88A1. It was I see. It was a recovery vehicle in the Army. Oh, I get it now. Okay. Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. And Diane says I had a 06 Mercury Grand Marquis. Now, that was a boat, wasn't it? I stored it inside in the winter, has 70,000 miles on it, love it. That was a car that you could drink. I mean, you would not drink and drive, but I mean, you could be a drinker in that car because you could drive it with one finger on the steering wheel. Remember that? And let me ask you a question, Diane. If I remember right, didn't that car have the... No, that was American Motors. Had the horn on the inside of the steering ring, so you just squeeze the wheel and it would honk the horn. Say yes or no, because I don't know. I'm thinking maybe it was American Motors had that monstrosity, but it could have been the Mercury Marquis. I don't know. A lot of weird stuff going on in those days. Yeah, that was a real boat. I mean, it had such a smooth suspension to it. 8-track was a huge machine. You see, you young people, you don't even know what an 8-track is. 8-track was the bomb. It was, because you could just have like tapes everywhere, and you just jam it in the dash, and it was like about 3 times the size of this cell phone, but you just jam it in the dash, and it just did a great job, and it played and played and played. Every once in a while, you got a bad player, it would eat the tape, but not very often. Not very often. That's cool. Very cool. Still didn't answer the question about the Jackson Browne tape, because I'll bet you had one. Ray says, my first car was a 1970 Chevelle SS with a 454. Did it have the cowl induction? Remember the cowl induction? When you step on the gas real hard, the cowl would open up because there was high pressure air right up against the windshield, and it would go right down into the breather. I'll tell you another car that was really bad. It was the 1969 Riviera with the cross ram. Remember that? 2 4-barrel carburetors in it. It looked like Mom's car. It had a kind of a Corvette glass in the back like this, and it looked like Mom's car. It didn't look like nothing. But that car had cross ram dual quads on it, and it was really, really fast. Oh, Andres, what are you talking about? He says, I wish my Ford Pinto hadn't blown up. I love that darn car. Whatever. Pinto. See, when you blow up the 4-cylinder overhead cam, I think it was a 2-liter engine, you take that out and you drop a 302 in it. Oh, then the Pinto comes alive, Andres. You should have tried that. That's what makes it fun to drive. And here's a car. I love this car. Well, I have to ask if it was blue, because I think all of them were blue. But the 1967 Buick Wildcat had positive traction rear end. It kind of looked like Mom's car too, but it was pretty quick. This one had to 455, he says. Now, the thing about the 67 455, as opposed to the later 55s, is this 55 was a HO. That is to say, it really had a lot of horsepower. I think it had 405 horsepower or something like that. The later version of it was a low compression engine, and they put it in sleds. It wasn't very powerful at all. I know a lot about cars. I write about them. If you read the Birth trilogy, I have a purple Dodge Challenger in there that's dual turbocharged, and it's badass. It's a 200-mile-an-hour car, and it's real. It's a real car. I've really seen it, and I have seen the dual turbos in it. It can be done. Oh, Robbie, you're making me so jealous here. This is great. My dad had a 69 Caddy with a hole in the back right floorboard, and I remember my first smell of carbon monoxide. Wow. Did it have the 429 Quadrajet, or 429, the 429 engine is what that Caddy had in it. That was a great car, man. What a boat. What a boat. If I remember right, didn't that car have the gas filler in the left tail light? You kind of flipped up the left tail light, and that's where you filled the gas up. I'm just guessing. I think my neighbor had one. Freedom. You made my day. He said, yes, I had Jackson Browne. See, everybody that had an 8-track, there were 2 tapes you had to have. One was Jackson Browne, and the other was Joel Walsh. Oh, I see. And you had Conway Twitty. And the Animals. Animals is okay, too, yeah. Stoker says, my first car was a 750 Norton, 135 miles an hour. I didn't really like the Nortons because the suspension was too stiff. It was like you choose between a Norton, which was a British bike, or a Honda. It was a no-brainer. You picked the 750 Honda all day long. It was way more reliable. Way more reliable. I'm just saying, Stoker. You could beat the heck out of that Honda 750, and it would just go and go and go. Not very powerful, but it was a fun bike. Yes, Mark says those mid-60s Rivieras were cool. Yes, they were. Yes, they were. Very surprisingly fast. It was like riding a fire hose. Quiet and quick. I can't believe we just ate up this hour talking about cars, and you all just love cars too. See, this is what I'm trying to say. And this is what breaks my heart about what's going on with this end of the Republic, with the first slug of executive orders that were written. It looks like we have taken a devastating blow on our position as world leaders in energy production. Why? Because they have it in their strategy that they want to switch everything over to green energy. And I think that's fine as long as the green energy exists. To say that, well, first we're going to get rid of the oil, and then after oils and gas is really expensive, we'll be motivated to do more research in the green energy, and then we'll make the switch. Here's the crazy thing. I've been to China a bunch of times, and I have bought maybe $500,000 worth of Chinese stuff to make electric trucks and to experiment with stuff. Batteries, solar panels, controllers, you name it. You name it. All kinds of stuff. When you go to China or Tibet or any place like that, they don't use that stuff. Passive solar, maybe solar water heaters or solar stoves, because there's no electricity in Tibet when you get outside the city. But they don't buy solar panels. They don't buy electric cars. They don't buy batteries. They make batteries. They make the electric car parts and the solar panels. And guess who buys them? We do. We're buying all Chinese technology to make ourselves green energy. But guess who we're making green? We're making China green. Oh, get out, Mark. Yeah, I know it never beat the Chrysler 426 Hemi. I had one. But what are you talking about? From gas station to gas station, maybe, because the Hemi was a gas hog. You can't even find Hemis in a car now. 426 Hemi, they're all the blocks are used for hot rods now. You can't find a stock one anywhere. And Professor Bauer, you, I think, are going to win the prize tonight. Curb feelers. I know you people that are younger than we are, you don't know what curb feelers are. Curb feelers were whiskers that stuck out on the passenger side, front and rear of the car, kind of like this. And the idea behind the curb feeler was when you were parallel parking, you were backing up against the curb on the right-hand side, the curb feeler would make this sound like, metal rubbing against the curb. And as soon as you heard that sound, you knew to cut the wheels. And then the car would just slide in there and you could get it right next to the curb without scuffing your hubcaps or messing up your white walls. That's what curb feelers were for. Of course, those of us that are really, really good at parking, we didn't need any of that stuff. We could zip in. I could still parallel park. I taught my kids how to parallel park for their driver's test. They didn't need it. They don't test that anymore, but still, it's a great skill to have. I had a 1967 Ford pickup truck that had 3 on the tree and 373 posi, and it had a 6-cylinder, the old 300. Well, I wore it out. I just wore it out. It burned so much oil it wasn't worth driving. So I pulled the 6-cylinder out, and I built a 302, flat cylinders, power pack heads. I dropped it in that truck, and I burned rubber every single day for 17 years. Every day. Every single day I burned rubber in that truck for 17 years. It was bulletproof. Absolute so much fun to drive. Short bed, step side. The metal in the fenders of that truck was thicker than the metal in my bumper of my 2016 Ford. That's just the way it was. All right. I want to talk a little bit about other forms of propulsion as we get into this hour. There's a lot going on in space, and I don't know if this is ever going to make a difference in cars or energy generation here on this planet. We talk about fusion, and fusion really only has one way to work. It has to put out more energy than you put in, right? I mean, what's the sense of mashing 2 protons together if you don't get enough energy out to facilitate the mashing of 2 more protons together? You have to continually feed energy, and that's called cold fusion, and who cares? Who cares? Who cares if you make helium from hydrogen? Nobody. Some fusion requires a very high activation energy. I'll explain activation energy. Anybody know what stick matches are? Yes, stick matches, like the phosphorus tip stick match. You can find a surface that will generate heat when you brush that match against it. Usually it's the little sandpaper on the side of the box, but you could light it on your pants or on a board or something like that, as long as it will generate heat. Why? Because the act of swishing that match raises the temperature through friction to the point where the phosphorus on the end lights on fire. Once it lights on fire, the energy from the fire is enough to light the rest of the match end, and you have a flame. That's activation energy. So it's sort of like you ramp up, and then the excess energy is enough to keep it lit until the match burns all the wood up. That's what we want to do with fusion. You want to find the point at which the little beggars will fuse together, and then the energy from the fusion is enough to facilitate perpetuating the plasma, this gas that conducts electricity. Now, of course, the secret is to find the right fuel. When we make weapons, atom bombs are pretty easy to do. You just take enriched uranium and smash it into one another with an explosive, And they'll get close enough to rub up against one another, and the neutrons will begin splitting the atoms, and that's fission, and it all comes apart. But it generates a lot of gamma radiation. And gamma radiation is very short wavelength, but very intense. And the gamma radiation creates enough force that it will facilitate the activation energy for fusion. So, long story short is, we use an atom bomb to make a fusion bomb or hydrogen bomb work. That's the way it works. We don't like it. I mean, it's great for warheads, but we don't want to use warheads. We don't want to do that anymore. You don't want to blow up an atom bomb in a room to get a fusion going. It's liable to blow the room apart. We want to do it another way. So we're using magnets, we're using lasers, we use omega lasers, we use amorphous magnets to create a flowing, suspended, and has to be kept away from the sides too, because it'll react with the sides, a plasma. And that plasma, then, what we want to feed that plasma is the right stuff. And the right stuff for a long time has been hydrogen in the form of deuterium or tritium. What is this? If you make them an offer for lots of thousand or more, then they will give you a discount too. Chinese don't do that. They think of it another way. They think you want 1,000 of them. Well, that means demand is high. If demand is high, then the price is high. That's the way they think of it. I'm just saying. I negotiated a good price on batteries. I can buy batteries cheaper than stores that sell batteries can buy them. I mean, literally, I can buy them so cheap compared to what other people can buy them for. Other people will sell batteries for $1.20, $1.25, $1.35. I was buying them for 85 cents. Same with solar panels. Solar panels are $1.50 a watt, and I can buy them for about 95 cents a watt. So if you get 1,000 watts, is that right? Maybe it's less than that. No, that's about right. Yeah, 1,000 watts for $900. That's about what it is. And they make more efficient panels, but they're way more expensive. It costs about $25,000 to $35,000 to put solar panels on a house. It takes you about 10 years to get a payback, and that's how we calculate it. In fact, we go to a person's house and we say, how much is your electric bill? They say, oh, it's $335 a month. So we say, okay, we could take your electric bill down to $50 a month, which means you save $280 a month. $280 a month times a year is about $3,000, $3,000 plus, times 10 is 30 grand, right? That's what we can charge you, $30,000, and in 10 years it's paid off just with your electric bill. So basically what you're doing is you're buying your electricity 10 years in advance. And then when 10 years is up, your solar panels are half used up and you don't get the return on investment like you thought. Still, it's good for cash flow, but I mean, if you have the money laying around, why put it in solar panels? Not very efficient. And no. The solar exterior paint, no good. No good. It's only about 4% efficient. The best solar panels are 15% efficient. 4% is not good. You'd have to paint a football field to get enough electricity. Not good. You got to use the prismatics. So, and if you don't believe me, go ask the founders of Cylindra. Okay? I know what I'm talking about here. So, to get this fusion to work, we're mashing the hydrogen protons together, but we're picky about what we do with them. If you use deuterium, which is 1 proton and 1 neutron, or tritium, which is 1 proton and 2 neutrons, the issue is that once you get the fusion to go, guess what you got to contend with? Those pesky energetic neutrons. And the bad part about neutrons is they have no charge on them. So you can't do anything with them. You can't get electricity from them. You can't influence them with magnetic fields. Nothing. So the only thing you can do is make them stick to something dense like lead. And that's what we do. We use the lead to catch the neutrons. So what? After a while, the lead becomes saturated with all these high-energy neutrons, and the lead becomes radioactive. We call that nuclear waste. So now what do we do with them? We have to bury them, and they're going to be radioactive for like 12,000 years. Ixnay. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. What we want is fusion with protons as the byproduct, not neutrons. If we had protons as the free byproduct, we can influence those with electrical charges. We can make electricity out of the protons. Yes, we can. That's how it's done. And then you have no radiation. Zippo, nada. So what is the source that we would use to get just protons and electricity? Helium-3. 2 protons, not one, 2 protons, and either 2 electrons or 1 electron. One electron would be, or one neutron is helium-3. And the thing about the helium-3 is, with that light neutron, it is not radioactive when you fuse it together. Helium-4 is everywhere. We have helium-4, 98% of the helium on our planet's helium-4, and you can't do diddly with it except fill party balloons. Helium-3 is what we need. It only exists near volcanoes, but on the moon it's quite plentiful. The issue is we haven't figured out how to fuse it. Quick break. We'll be right back after this. Don't go away.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically autonomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday, 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
We're an anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look. It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. You what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Okay. As soon as this is done scanning, we'll get back with more Revolution Radio. Excellent. Very nice. System is activated and we are ready to go. Hopefully no more echoing. Yes, no. Nope, we should be good to go. All right. I don't know why I have that ping back. I can hear an echo on my headphones. Maybe that's going to go away in a second. So, I promised I was going to go with some lemons, so let's go ahead and do that right now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hit the distribute button in DLive right now, and here we go, right now. So we are now distributing awards, about 25 seconds. We're going to find out. I'm giving away 500 lemons. This is generous in lemon land. And we'll see in about 10 seconds who's going to get those lemons. It'll be good. So I want to talk a little bit more about fusion, because as it relates to space exploration, we're kind of doing the baby steps. 2 seconds, 1 second, and Moverling 5, 177.2 lemons. Wild Boar 3,102. Michael 1973, 74.1. Vonnie Kinsey 59.1, and Big D 1955 cashes in again 49.6. Excellent. So now that's going out. I like DLive just for that reason. It allows me to give away stuff. We enjoy it. So the fusion is something that we haven't accomplished yet, and I think it's because we're trying to do it on Earth. Two things are holding us back. One is gravity. It's very difficult to suspend that plasma in any volume because you have to have tremendous magnetic fields to isolate it, not only from the sides, but also from gravity itself. And the other thing is vacuum. If you have any kind of sizable chamber at all, you have to get all the air out of that chamber. It can take a long time and take a lot of energy to remove all that air. The seals on the vacuum can't leak either. You don't want to suck vacuum oil back into your plasma. You can have a big problem. Those problems are pretty much solved in space. obviously have a vacuum on the moon, and you have a vacuum in open space, pretty much. You have cold temperatures, and you have very low gravity, or no gravity, which would be a big, big help. And once we get that fusion going, there are a couple things that'll happen. Of course, first of all, we have a plentiful source of power. And that power can be used to generate electricity, heat, and that's all we need to produce an environment on the moon. I don't mean on the surface of the moon, terraforming the moon, but the inside of the moon. We can change the volcanic tunnels into living zones with heat and atmosphere and electricity, light, to grow plants, to support humans without having a suit on. You would still have 1/6 the gravity that you have here. So if you weigh, let's see, 150 pounds here, obviously you would weigh 1/6 that on the moon. That would be pretty nice. Somewhere around, 25 pounds, 30 pounds. And you could jump a long way if you weighed that much. But you would also, your muscles would atrophy, but you just pick up heavy stuff. You could pick up a car and exercise with it. The helium-3 exists in solid form on the moon. You just shovel it into the reactor and off it goes. The other thing that's on the moon is mountains and mountains of frozen water. If you have frozen water and you have an energy source, you can make oxygen, you can make water, and you can make fuel. To make fuel, you can refuel or fuel things that you build on the moon. Very, very essential to have those three things on the moon. I think we need to be thinking about doing fusion on the moon and not doing fusion on the Earth. It just takes too much infrastructure to do it here. And I don't think ITER is ever going to be finished. The ITER is ever going to be finished. It's 40 years away from being done, and they were working on it when I graduated college, and it's just never going to get done. It's just too much money. It's too far out. They're making too many engineering changes that require them to tear out too much concrete and steel, and it's just never going to work. The other type of fusion is sort of a play on words. There's a company called Apollo Fusion. Now, Apollo Fusion said it is going to provide its Apollo Constellation Engine. They call it the ACE. It is an electric propulsion system for low Earth orbit constellation of at least 10 satellites. York is building for launch next year. The companies did not disclose the constellation, but York won a Space Development Agency contract last year in August for 10 satellites, scheduled for launch in 2022, and we just kind of paired up the slots, and that's how we made this conclusion. So, Spaceflight Sherpa, Space Tug, and the U.S. Air Force is going to fly it on an unmanned intelligence spacecraft. Apollo now has firm orders for more than 20 propulsion systems from those 4 customers, but it could grow to an order of 200 or even 2,000 thrusters. Now, I don't know if you know what a electric propulsion thruster is in space. There are 2 kinds. One is the Canna motor, which basically works off the Casimir effect. The Casimir effect says, and it's repeatable and reliable, that if you machine 2 plates very, very flat, and you put those metal plates very close together in a vacuum, and put a charge on those plates, spontaneously, out of we don't know where, particles will appear in between those 2 plates from another dimension. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, very repeatable and reliable. The assumption is that not enough particles will appear between those plates to catch them with the grid and accelerate them out the back and come up with any kind of propulsion. The reality is that the Canna motor did generate 50 micronewtons of thrust with no fuel, just electricity. Just electricity. So put the solar panels on it, put the Casimir type thruster on it, and you end up with thrust. 50 micronewtons, which is not much, but it's something. What's really impressive is the ISP. The ISP is a ratio of thrust to weight, or thrust to mass of your propellant itself. For instance, a jet flying through the air has a very high ISP, but it's using air as part of the thrust. In space, you don't have this. All you have is the particles themselves. So you don't end up with a lot of thrust, but you do end up with a lot of velocity. Okay, that's like, in the early days, we were talking about cars for the first hour. In the early days, there were European cars like Volkswagens or cars like that in this country, you were lucky to get 65 miles an hour out of them, and you really had to floor them. These 40 horsepower cars just couldn't get very fast. They weren't very aerodynamic. They weren't very efficient. They were carbureted. They had one little one-barrel carburetor on it. You maybe could get 65 miles an hour out of it, and you had to floor it to get there. But for some reason in Europe, the European-made Volkswagen, the German-made Volkswagen, would go 110 miles an hour. It still took a long time to get there, but they designed it so that it had higher velocity, even though it didn't have much more thrust. That's what's unique about these fusion motors. But Apollo has approached it a different way. Apollo doesn't use the Casimir effect. Nope. Apollo uses xenon or krypton. These are very, very small gases. Okay? Neon is 10 protons. It's really small, and it's very stable. 10 protons, 10 neutrons, 10 electrons. It's really stable. But you can charge the little beggars, turn them into a plasma, and you can accelerate them out the back at very high velocity. Yeah, like way on up to a fraction of light speed out the back. Now, it's not much thrust, but the ISP is good enough that if it's left on long enough, you can get very high speeds. Like when you watch space movies, not The Expanse, because they're already using fusion rocketry and they'll burn from here to Mars. And then they'll decelerate. So they have about 1 G of gravity accelerating. Then they flip the thing around and decelerate, and you have 1 G of deceleration. But that ship is flying, man. It's like 2 weeks to Mars. 2 weeks is flying. This, you're not going to get that kind of acceleration. But you are going to get the speed, because you can leave it on for a long time, like weeks. And if you leave something that's pushing out 0.2, 0.3 light speed out the back for a week, you can get your speeds up to where that thing's blazing. And you can cover vast distances in a short amount of time. They have sent probes all the way to the asteroid belt up near Jupiter. Yeah, and received information back. I'm serious. So the ISP, this is the thrust to mass ratio, is pretty good in space. Otherwise, you're going to have to carry fuel. And if you carry a lot of fuel, you have to lift it. And at $12,000, $15,000 a kilogram, it's expensive to lift the fuel, and it's counterproductive. But once you get these craft into space, you could refuel them with neon or krypton. They could go for years. Unbelievable, because it's a very small gas, and you can compress it down to almost a solid, and you can carry a lot of fuel in very, very small space, very, very light. So what Apollo Fusion has done is they have, of course, taken on a very, very bright staff. One of the young guys there is in his late 30s, and he already has 10 years of experience making fusion thrusters, making these electric thrusters. The other guy One of the founders of the company was with another big company, I think Microsoft. So these are big names, and the manufacturing capacity has helped the company to win these contracts. He says, let's see, who is this talking? Oh, Cassidy. The strategy also relies on a manufacturing partner capable to produce large volumes of thrusters. Cassidy declined to name that company. They're using a contract manufacturer. I'd like to be that contract manufacturer, to tell you the truth. But it said it produces other components for companies such as Northrop Grumman and Raytheon. For them to do 10 units a month or 100 units a month is trivial. The main bottleneck to production is access to vacuum chambers needed for acceptance testing of the completed thrusters. See, you build them on the moon, that expense goes away. You could even send the components to the moon and assemble it on the moon, and it still beat the cost of production. Apollo Fusion is continuing research and development of thruster designs. The company currently offers two versions of the ACE, one that uses 400 watts of power and the other uses 1,400 watts. This is not much when you're considering solar panels in space in the solar system, because solar panels in space are a lot more efficient. You don't have an atmosphere in the way, and the solar panels don't oxidize because there's no oxygen for them to oxidize. The higher power thruster incorporates electromagnetic shielding to reduce erosion on the thruster components from the plasma. Run out of fuel before you erode away the sides of that thruster. And hopefully we figure out a way to refuel the little beggars. The lower power thruster is smaller but lacks the electromagnetic shielding. The company is improving the design to increase its lifetime. Some customers, he said, are seeking a hybrid of the two designs, one with higher power, but that is also lighter. Seeing evidence that the market is excited about what we're offering. That's good. That's what we want to see. Now, I know that some of you are not really excited about exploring space. And we didn't do it for a long time, but there are a couple reasons that I make the case that it is important that we do this. First, it's important that we do this because other countries are going to be doing this. Alan says, I strongly agree with something you recently said. Okay, he puts $3 in the top chat, but doesn't tell me what it is I recently said. So I'm a genius. I get it. The first thing is that other countries are going to be doing it. Okay, China's going to be doing it. Russia's going to be doing it. India's going to be doing it. Heck, Israel's going to be doing it. And so you don't want to be left behind on this kind of stuff, and you don't want to piggyback on other people's stuff, because the second reason is tied to this. It's a national security issue. It's the high ground. He who controls the moon will control the earth. Take it to the bank. Take it to the bank. That is a fact. So you don't want to have a hostile country or a hostile group of countries or a hostile company, for that matter, or a military force take over the moon that doesn't have America's best interests at heart. And I would think, at least I'm kind of biased, I guess, in that I think America would be the best country to control the moon, because I don't think we would use it to conquer other countries. That's not what we're all about anymore. Of course, I don't know what the leadership that we have now in the White House, because the cabinet that is being selected are all Democrat war hawks. They're all fighters. They all want to spend trillions of dollars on weapons and bullets and bombs and dying. And it just drives me crazy to see this kind of stuff. Just nuts. I don't understand why we're pushing troops and equipment and planes and bombs back into Syria. I think we should get out of Syria. We should stay out of the Middle East. It's none of our business. We don't need to be over there fighting this stupid war. I don't want to send my boys or my grandkids, and I don't want you to send your boys or your daughters over there. It's nuts. Just stay out. But that's not what the Democrats like doing. They like killing and dying and spending lots of money on weapons. I just don't get it. But we go to the moon and beyond, it changes the game. Now, the game is really getting interesting, and one of the reasons people like listening to America Free Radio is we talk about some really far out science sometimes. Now, the mysterious mythos that surrounds the UFO phenomenon. Now, we're not ufologists here. I have seen a UFO. I've photographed UFO. I'm not a believer. I'm a knower, okay? I know that there are ships flying around the earth, and you do too. But I also know they're as present as they want to be. They are. If they wanted to be more present, there's probably nothing we could do about it. So this has been completely rewritten time and time again here in the United States since the 50s. And a new chapter, I think, is getting ready to be written. And I think that the last chapter was pretty darn interesting. For quite some time, the prevailing belief was that little green men from Mars were piloting flying saucers and visiting planet Earth to have sex with Earth women. I think it's a good reason. I think it is. I would come to Earth for Earth women. I did come to Earth for Earth women. There were even rumors that they may have crash landed in the New Mexico desert back in the 1940s. And I interviewed the authors of Roswell books. I was good friends with Stanford Friedman. And I think these are intelligent men who knew what they were talking about. And I don't think they doubted the evidence one bit. Now, fast forward to now, and infamous alleged Area 51 insider Bob Lazar, we've heard the name. I'm rolling my eyes. For those of you that are listening on audio only, that is a digital eye roll, has suggested these alien craft are not only from much further away than Mars, but that the craft themselves are propelled by the manipulation of space-time itself. Now, this is really the new page. One of the things that UFO sightings really have in common is that they don't go ripping across the sky, busting out sonic booms as they go. No, they get chased by jets, and the jets are played with, I guess. The Tic Tac just played with the F-18 Super Hornet. It didn't just zip away and make him think it was a mirage. It played with him. It showed up on his radar. It showed up on his infrared camera. Just out of range, but there wasn't much he could do about it. It's 115, William. 114 gravity, 116 antimatter. I get it. But 115 is the elusive element you're searching for there. So one of the things they have in common is that these ships, no matter how small or how big they are, they phase out of existence. The one that I took a picture of up in Washington State wasn't exactly corporal. It was a daytime shot. It was a shot taken with two separate cameras, two different brands, two different angles at the same location. We both picked up the ship. The ship was extremely similar in shape, kind of long cigar shaped, and I would say the distance that we were filming or photographing this ship, it was about 500 feet long. 500 feet, that's a pretty good sized ship. I don't know how tall or how thick it was because it was fuzzy. Now, keep in mind, folks, that these were 14 megapixel cameras. Okay? I could zoom into Mount Adams on a bush if I wanted to. And yet the ship sitting there about 1,000 feet off of the mountain was fuzzy. It just wouldn't come in clear. And that was what was peculiar to us. It was like it was either bending the light around it, or it was vibrating, or the air around it was vibrating at such a frequency that the digital chip in the camera could pick it up, but our eyes could not. Our eyes could not resolve this massive ship sitting there in broad daylight, but our cameras could see it. It was sort of like, taking a picture with infrared. With infrared, obviously you're picking up in a much longer wavelength than your eyes can see, somewhere around 1,050 or 1,100 nanometers. Your eyes can't pick up that wavelength, but infrared can pick it up just fine. So if something is sitting out there and it's radiating energy in the 1,000 to 1,100 nanometer range, it's visible to infrared cameras, but it's not visible to the naked eye. Naked eye can't pick up that wavelength. Not humans anyway. Maybe a cat can, but not humans. So in our continuing investigation into this, the bizarre inventions that people have come up with, and I have looked at all kinds of energy technology, the one thing that stands out when it comes to this is the enigmatic aerospace engineer who works for the U.S. Navy. Now, this is legit stuff here. So, the Naval Air Warfare Center Aircraft Division tested core concepts and technology underlying this guy's seemingly out-of-this-world UFO patents. Yeah, they are real patents. Now, these same patents were vouched for by the head of the Navy's Aerospace Division. This is the research enterprise who cited Chinese advances in similar technologies as one of the reasons why the Navy was filing them. Now, let's see if I can find this here. The Freedom of Information Act releases provide unprecedented insights not just into how seriously the Navy took Dr. Pais's work, but also exactly how elements of it were actually tested at the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars and where the program may have ended up. The materials even include mention of a space-time modification weapon. And yes, some of these patents were downright spooky. In one strange section describing test results, investigators reported that technicians felt a strange sensation on their skin as they approached the test article. I know what this feels like. Although they note that there are plenty of prosaic explanations for such sensations. Could have been static electricity. That's actually my explanation. As for whether or not any of the weapons have made it into practice, that is still much of a mystery as the origin of these craft. Well, it's a little bit like, yes, William, the craft I saw was 157 meters. That makes sense. And nice to see you out there, Plan V. Sorry you missed the lemon giveaway earlier, but we're glad you stopped by, and we're glad you're there. Thank you so much for visiting us tonight. Yes, and to answer your question, William, the gravity waves are internal and they're external. And with 115, for some reason, they're external, and what they were trying to figure out is a way to amplify them, a way to grid them. Now, I wrote years ago about what I call gravity lensing technology. I don't have anything to back this up. This is just something that came to me one day in meditation. But it's basically a source of gravity, gravitational waves, on a molecular level. Of course, that mass can be concentrated with magnetic fields, but the gravity can then be lensed and it can be focused. So if it's focused under you, then it would lift off the ground. If it's focused behind you, it would thrust you forward. But you have to have something to push against. You got to have a planet to push against. Gravity has to have an anti-gravity or a gravitational reflection to lens against. It wouldn't work so much in open space because you're not really accelerating anything. It's just gravity. You have to have something to pull toward or push from. That's how the gravity lens works. Fine for exploring a planet, not so fine for going through space. This technology is what you would need to actually go through space. Now, the phenomenon has been noticed and it has been measured. And it's interesting, the phenomenon I'm about to describe to you, where this was measured, and it was in an unexpected place. In the Nordic areas, when the fjords, sometimes they'll freeze solid. The water will freeze all the way across, like an iceberg that blocks the fjord, okay? Now, the issue is, of course, that in the springtime, the snow on the mountains begins to melt. As it melts, it should reach the fjord and flow out to sea. But that's not what happens sometimes. Sometimes the fjords are so narrow that ice will block the fjord. And so what happens is the water begins to build up behind this ice dam. And it can build up to significant height, which means behind this dam is like, Hoover Dam, not that much, but a lot of water behind this ice dam. And of course, springtime comes, it gets warmer and warmer and warmer, and the water pressure behind the dam gets more and more and more, and eventually, we don't know exactly when, but eventually that dam will break, and all that water will flow out to sea. Well, a photographer decided to go and camp in, the wildflowers of the fjord up above the ice dam, maybe downstream just a little bit of it. And he set up his cameras. Some of them were what we call time-elapsed, where it takes a shot about every 10 seconds, right? And it runs for several days. And so what you're watching is fast days and fast sunsets, and so to speak. But you get a time-elapsed version. And the other is just a running film, and probably filming in a couple of different wavelengths, infrared and visible and maybe even ultraviolet. Long story short, what happens is he begins to hear, and you can hear this if people that live up north know what I'm talking about, and you can validate this in the chat room if you want. If you've ever skated on a river, a frozen river outside, it gets pretty cold in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and I have to tell you, we skated on the Red River, okay? But, you're out there on your hockey skates, and it'll tear up a set of skates because there's grit, that gets in that. But in the early part of the year, it's not so snurty, and you can go ahead and skate on the river. But one of the things that you hear is, and I don't know if you've ever been shot at before, but if you've ever been shot at before, you can hear the bullets. They go by. They make a zipping sound in the air. And it's not too bumpy. I'm telling you, Diane, it's, you get down in the river. It's kind of shielded from the wind. The ice is about 12 inches thick. It's plenty safe. And you get out there and skate on it and slap the puck around a little bit. It's great for the first month. After that, it just tears your skates up too bad. You have to reground every time you skate. But the point is that the ice is moving under the stress of the water underneath it all the time, so it cracks. And you hear this, pew, and it sounds like it's going right by your head, like somebody's shooting a .22 from a mile away. Well, he begins to hear these sounds in the ice dam. Pew, 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 pew. And you can hear these micro cracks zipping through this ice dam. And all of a sudden, like, it all just gave way at one time, and the whole dam began to bulge forward. Well, this huge volume of water, we're talking, I'm just trying to give you the visual of it. When the water began to move under that kind of stress, he said he got the feeling like he was in a state of despair, like he was going to die. And when he looked around, on the ground, all the grass and the flowers that were on the ground and everything, and his cameras, there was a blue haze, like a plasma was building up on the sides of the mountains because of the electrical charge that was releasing as this water began to move all at once. Now, it wasn't so much the electrical charge as it was the stress of the water itself as a molecule. Water is a very unique molecule of all molecules. At rest, at what we call standard pressure and temperature, it has oxygen, which is, I don't even have a molecular model to show you, but oxygen is like this big molecule like this, and then hydrogen are two little protons like this. Oxygen 16 times, the size of protons, 16 protons compared to one on each side. But the oxygen has 2 electrons on top, which are repelling the 2 hydrogen protons. So it assumes about 110 degree angle at standard temperature and pressure. That's H2O, okay? Now, when it's frozen, what happens is that angle relaxes a little bit. And when it relaxes, it actually expands the overall mass. It's the only molecule that does this. When it freezes, it has such powerful forces, it will bust a rock. It'll break granite. It has that much force. It's pretty crazy, the molecular force of water. Water is a very unique molecule. So the stress of all this water releasing at one time created this plasma, which this photographer said put him in an altered state. He thought he was phase shifting. He thought he was going to die. Now, after the water passed and everything, that anxiety passed, that plasma passed, the phase shifting passed. He didn't have any extra equipment there to measure it, but to hear his description of it, that's what he was going through. So it turns out that the stressing of water, this very unique molecule in the universe, seems to be able to create this kind of phase shifting, or shall we say, an interdimensional kind of force that once we amplify it, make it strong enough, focus it, maybe a ship could move through space-time. This is in the Navy patent. Now, a lot of people wonder, where in the world did this patent come from? Well, it goes back to a story. After World War II, a lot of the German submarines escaped Germany. And they weren't part of the war effort. They were part of the escape effort. These old sub pilots would basically pack that sub with money and gold and friends and whatever, and they would sail to the U.S., and then they would scuttle the sub, sink it to the bottom, and either take a boat or somehow make it to shore and blend into American society. Now, after the war, smart salvage companies went looking for the subs because it was scrap iron that they could haul to the surface and you could make good money. And so what they would do is they would drag magnets along the bottom until they made contact with one of these subs down in the water. You couldn't see it from the surface. I mean, it's the Hudson, so you know what I'm talking about. Not very clear water. Once they made contact with it, then what they would do is they would send a diver down in a suit, one of those suits where you pressurize it from the surface with a compressor. Still, you got these heavy boots on and a heavy bronze helmet, and this guy's job was to go down there and connect a cable to that sub so that they could pull it to the surface and begin to cut it apart and sell it for salvage. So they're dragging the bottom, and they come across something that makes contact with their magnet. They stop the boat. They drop the diver down. He's going down, and he's feeling his way through the murky, filthy water off the coast of New York. And he comes up on this shape, which he says, look like a sub to him. This is what he reported in his story. As he walks forward, he's going to try to walk forward and put his hand, on the shape. And then what he can do is he can take the cable that they feed him down from the surface and wrap it around and cinch it off. And it, takes a little bit of time, but the subs aren't all that big, and you can find some place to get underneath it and around it, or hook it around the fin or the conning tower or something to winch it and get it to the surface. But as he walks forward to put his hand on it, all of a sudden, he falls forward in an open air bubble. You remember the movie The Abyss? You remember when the alien pushed all the water back and he was able to take his helmet off? Well, that's exactly what happened to this diver. He found himself face down on the bottom with no water around him. The ship had pushed the water away and had created a kind of air bubble in which this ship was parked on the bottom. And when he stood up, he realized that he didn't have his helmet on anymore. So he opens the visor of his helmet and realizes, hey, I can breathe down here. And he realizes that he is being communicated with by this ship telepathically. They're not talking to him, they're thinking to him. So rather than run, he decides to go inside the ship and he makes contact. And of course, the very first thing on his mind, since he's a salvage expert, is, what the heck powers this thing? How do you do this? And what they showed him was this conical, kind of swirling shaped machine that stressed water. It was able to stress the water molecule in such a way that it would create this plasma field that the ship used to make its bubble and to move itself through space and time. That's where the patent came from. That's how anomalous this is. Now, I don't know where it went from here, and I don't know if we're ever going to figure out how to jump across the solar system or the galaxy. But if this is possible, then it changes the UFO game. Now, we're not talking about UFOs that have been here for a long, long time, before modern man, before prehistoric man, maybe another zenith of mankind on the earth, raised to its power, maybe the old ancient Vimanas or whatever, and they wiped each other out down to a small contingent. The atmosphere was so toxic they had to live somewhere else on the bottom of the sea. And they developed a genetics over time with their small gene pool that made it where they could not exist in the viral and bacterial environment of our surface like we can. So they stay separate from us. That was our theory for a long, long time, and it may still be a significant part of the theory. But now this changes the game. We're not talking about locals that have been around for 1 billion years or 500 million years or 5 million years. We're talking about non-locals, people that are not from around here, people who had enough energy and to spare to be able to find Earth. That's not an easy thing to do. You could see Earth from Mars because we photographed it from Mars. It's blue, it's round, it's sitting out there. You can see Earth from Mars. But you can't see Earth from outside our solar system. The light bends around our heliosphere. You'd be very, very hard-pressed to find a planet the size of Earth around the sun, unless the Earth passes in front of the sun, blocks a little bit of the light, and that drop in light can be viewed from a distance away. Like we look at other stars, and we notice a couple things about the stars. Sometimes the stars wobbling back and forth. And what does that tell us? There's something gravitational revolving around that sun. And we can tell, based on the size of the sun and how much it's wobbling, how big that planet is. It's called perturbation theory. The other idea is if we happen to look at it right on the plane and that planet passes right in front of the sun, it dims that sun a little bit and we can look at the dimming of that light, and we can also calculate how big that planet is. But think of the odds. Think of the odds that you're looking right at the flat plane of that solar system. Yeah, pretty skinny. We got to look at other ways. Normally, we look at the way the sun is wobbling, and we use that perturbation theory. That being said, we look at our own solar system with perturbation theory, and we see, generally speaking, most of our planets are on one side of the sun. I mean, they are. Mercury, Venus, Earth, so forth. They're all basically on one side of the sun. And yet, the sun doesn't wobble too bad. The sun doesn't pull like it has 9 planets on one side of it. Like a guy swinging the hammer at the Olympics. He leans back because of the weight of the hammer. Nope. The sun's pretty much standing straight up and down. Now, it is massive, but it's not that massive. Not when you consider all the planets, Jupiter, and all the gas giants and everything swinging around the sun gravitationally. It means that some other gravitational body is out there on the other side of the sun, balancing the sun. Some people think it's a 10th planet. Maybe it's a star. Maybe it's a black hole. We don't know. But there's more to space than what we know. So, Delina, I know you have to make dinner. So you're going to listen later, and I appreciate that. Nothing should get in the way of food. It's one of my favorite things about this planet is the food. And I don't mean eating a lot of it and making myself into a glutton, but the flavors, just so incredible. Ever since I was a little kid, I can remember being the last one to leave the table. I'm just a slow eater. It doesn't matter if I'm hungry. Bacon and eggs, pizza, steak, you name it. I'm the last person to the table. You know why? Because I enjoy the food. Food is entertainment to me. I don't eat to get full. I don't eat to get stuffed. In fact, I don't like to feel stuffed. I want to eat slow. I want to savor. Okay? It's like sex, right? You don't want to just procreate. You want to practice. Foreplay is 99.9% of the sex. It just is. Eating slow is foreplay. It just is. And you should do it. You should savor food and drink and yourselves and your lovers. So, Delina, go make dinner. Enjoy it. Take hours to eat. You can always listen to this later. So what's going on the Earth? Well, we used to monitor the earthquakes. We don't do it too much anymore because there's so many. And we already know the patterns of them, so there's nothing new under the sun there. But volcanoes are interesting. They're kind of rare, and they can be kind of cataclysmic. That is to say, one good volcanic eruption can change the productivity of all the farmland on the planet for a period of time. Oh, yes, it can. Now, Indonesia's most active volcano has today erupted with a river of lava. Yeah. Indonesian volcano unleashes a river of lava that is really, really visible. Let's see. It's flowing 1,600 meters down its slope. It was Mount Merapi's biggest lava flow since authorities raised its danger level in November, because volcanologists are now monitoring all these volcanoes with instruments, and they can kind of tell by the rumbling and the frequency of the rumbling and the interval of the rumbling when it's going to blow. Pretty darn close. That's how they knew Mount St. Helens was about to go, and they went and got everybody and said, you need to get out. And the people that didn't get out, they died. They died. Now, after the morning rain, ashfall turned into muck in several villages where the sound of eruption could be heard 18 miles away. That's a long way to hear rumbling. You don't even hear thunder that far away. You'd be lucky to hear thunder 5,000 or 6,000 feet, maybe. 1 or 2 miles. Yeah, it's something. Oh, I'm sorry. Every second is a mile. Every second is a mile. So if you hear the flash, count 1, 2, 3. That's 3 miles. But you hardly ever hear one 18 miles away. That's a lot of force. Authorities in November had evacuated nearly 2,000 people living on the mountain. That's kind of a dangerous place, probably a low-rent district. The alert was being maintained at the second highest level, and authorities told people to stay out of the existing 5-kilometer danger zone around the crater. The 2,968 meter, that's roughly 10,000 feet, is on the densely populated island of Java and near the ancient city of Yogyakarta. It is the most active of dozens of Indonesian volcanoes and has repeatedly erupted with lava and gas clouds recently. I'd be buying a plane ticket, don't you think? It would be a good idea, I think. Kathleen says 70s while living in Nicaragua, we would go to the volcano in Masaya, look inside. You could see a deep red sea of lava. Pretty stupid, but awesome. Yeah, well, it's like, let's go take a look. It's not going to blow today. It might blow tomorrow. We get some good footage. Equity. Right now, the big argument in politics, what are we at? Oh, we got 4 minutes left. The big argument in politics is equity versus equality, and I want you to pay attention to these words because they're going to be played on you in the next couple of weeks. Equality is a little different than equitable. Equitable means that everybody earns the same amount of money no matter what you do. Equality, to me, should mean everybody has an equal opportunity. You have the opportunity to go to school and learn whatever you need to learn. You have the opportunity to develop yourself, to invest, to work, to travel, to express your interest in. You have that equality to do that. And there should be nothing, not the color of your skin, not your sex, not your orientation, anything, except for your own intelligence and your own willingness to work hard that keeps you from being successful. Equity is something different. Equity is something that government steps in and says, no matter what you earn, we're going to apply social justice. But really, if you kind of peel back the layers of this ideology, you get to the core of this belief system. They are advocating for a kind of cultural revolution, and it is Marxism. Okay, it is adjusted to identity politics, and now it's activated with militant organizations that are worth a lot of money, like Black Lives Matter, through critical race theory, which basically says white people didn't exist until the early 1600s and are the bane of planet Earth, which is absurd and ridiculous. The ideological permeation of American institutions, Rufo warns, is spurring on a dangerous cancel culture movement. Beware of it. Keep yourself aloof from it. Don't get sucked in by it. We have a great country. We have a great constitution. We have the oldest constitution in the world. We have great rights that have been protected by laws and by courts. And I think my feeling is this is kind of a fad and it will pass. Yes, I think Biden is going to keep signing executive orders. But you know what's going to happen? Those executive orders are going to run up against the federal courts, and they're going to get stopped, just like Obama's did, just like Trump's did. His will stop as well. Don't panic. Don't run to Panama. Don't sell everything. Don't get crazy. Get ready to go back to work because everything is about to break loose. Look, I want you to go out and look for the good in others and help it to grow a little bit every day. And before long, you'll save the planet. This is America Free Radio. We explore the mysteries of the universe and of the earth, and the results are always positive here. So remember this. Where we go one, we go all. Support one another, love one another, and don't worry about being loved back. You start worried about being loved back, you're gonna change the whole dynamic. The idea is I love you, you love me, and that's the way it moves forward. You start worrying about how much you are loved, you're going to be a politician, and you're going to be miserable like an actress or an actor all the days of your life. Don't pay any attention to the reviews. Don't pay any attention to your critics. You keep moving, you keep smiling, you keep loving. Enjoy the food and enjoy your car. And we'll see you here on Sunday night, same time, 8 p.m. We're on every Sunday, every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Wednesdays for 2 hours, Sundays for 3 hours. This is America Free Radio. And I say, peace, Earth Explorers. Now go and do. And I guess as George Carlin would say, be excellent to each other. Let's see what we got going on in the chat room real quick. Thank you. Thank you very much for being in the chat room. Thanks for the great questions. I love talking about cars. And we could talk about airplanes or fishing or whatever you want to talk about. No questions are out of bounds here. Yes, Andres, all is not lost. We still have plenty of dental floss. Don't run out of dental floss. Or quality toilet paper. This is important too. You don't have to hoard it. You can just reduce yourself to 2 or 3 squares at a time and you'll be fine. All right? Be peaceful, Earth Explorers. And don't forget to go to freedomslips.com and become a patron there. We don't need the money here at America Free Radio. They do. All right? So go there. Be a good patron. We'll see you on Sunday. See you all.